Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our Mobile App Academy, where we show you how to build and deploy mobile apps on the ServiceNow platform. My name is David Hott, and I'm an outbound product manager here at ServiceNow. And I want to give you a warm welcome to everyone joining us live here in this morning, whether it's morning, afternoon, or the evening for you. If you are joining us live, let us know if you're joining, where you're joining in from and who you are. And if you're brand new to using our new mobile apps at ServiceNow, definitely let us know in the chat as well. We love getting new insight from all of you, whether it's from here or from mobile community. And we like to put together these mobile app academy sessions based on what we hear and what you want to learn more about. And based on popular request, this week, we're actually going to be giving a walkthrough on mobile application management support for mobile. We're hearing some questions like, what EMM providers do we support? How does ServiceNow use app config? And things like, does MEM integration for Intune and BlackBerry work on instances prior to Orlando? So we're going to spend some time giving you an overview on what we do support and answer any other questions that may come up along the way. And to lead our session, we have a guest speaker today. His name is Fu Ho, and he is a solution architect here at ServiceNow, and he's also part of our mobile team. And as we take more deep dives on mobile in the future for future mobile app academies, we'd like to continue introducing other mobile experts and guest speakers to cover various other concepts across mobile, depending on what you're looking forward to hearing. So continue reaching out to us. Let us know on mobile community what you want to learn about next. And before we get started, if you have any questions throughout today's presentation, feel free to send them over in the Q&A section of Zoom. And at the end of the presentation, we'll circle back and address them. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Thu, who will give us an overview and walkthrough on mobile application management support for mobile.
Thanks, David. How you guys hear me okay? David, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. All right, so I'm going to share, I'll give you a brief overview of what EMM is, the difference between MAM and MDM. So let me share one of my screens. Okay. So I'm going to give you a general overview of what enterprise mobility means in the intercorporate space, enterprise space. So EMM is split into two things. It's usually MDM, and mobile device management is basically a way for a corporation that can manage a device, provision it, apply some sort of application protection policy, and so forth. And then MAM is mobile application management, where companies allow their employees to bring their personal devices and they want to connect to services like email, calendar, and so forth, right? So they want some sort of corporate data applications or data on their personal devices. And so you have these two environments, and they also want security within these devices, right? So how do you do that, right? So going down to some of the use cases for some mobile security features is for MDM, you get jailbreak detection. You get to apply some sort of PIN enforcement if the user doesn't it's not active. It will force a PIN to relog in. There's device enrollment, there's force check-in, and then you can also whitelist, blacklist certain apps. Okay, and so that's how they manage the device. And for MAM, you can basically do jailbreak detection if the device has if the application has some sort of MDM SDK. There are some DLP, data loss prevention features as well. You can restrict, copy, and paste, and so forth. And so to help understand this whole enterprise space, there are some useful acronyms that you guys might have heard before. There's DLP, B2B, business to business, for application distribution. BYOD is basically your personal device. DEP, this is more of an Apple thing, to enroll the device, and so forth. And so what ServiceNow has done is that to address the companies with MAM requirements, we embedded we embedded two MDM SDKs. One of them is Intunes, and the other one is BlackBerry, and we released it in February 20th. So if you go to our app store right now, you can basically see these apps. You notice that there's an icon to the very right for Intunes, and then there's also another icon for BlackBerry, and I'll show you that a little bit later. So some of the questions that we get, a very common question is that do we distribute the APK file or the IPA file so that companies can basically wrap their app or re-sign it with their own MDM SDK? And the answer is no. Legally, we can't do that. And so the other one is, why do you have so many? Why don't we just embed all our MDM SDKs for all the major MDMs? The reason why we don't do that is because it will just flood the market or our app store with all our apps, and it's very confusing for the users to download which one, right? So those are very common questions that we get. And so one of the things that how we support EMM customers is through a thing called app config. And I'm going to share another deck with you guys. All right. So here's another deck that I have. The things that we support is a thing called app configuration. And app configuration is, if you don't know what that is, it's just a standard approach of configuring mobile apps, and it's using key value pairs. And majority of all major MDM vendors support this. So there's two things that we support. One of them is you can pre-configure your default instance. And how you do that is you just go to your app config and apply this key and then the value of your URL. You have to provide it the entire length of your URL of your instance. And I'll show you a demo of how that looks like later on. And the second thing we can provide support is changing your default browser. And this is for customers who have very specific use cases where they only allow specific browsers into their environment. By default, if you launch your application with iOS, it will launch the Safari browser. And if you come in with Android, it's going to launch the Chrome browser for authentication. You can change this behavior by setting this key and then setting the value as well. So if you're using Mobile Iron and you only allow Mobile Iron managed browser, you can set this key and then say the value would be Web at Work, and then it will launch the Mobile Iron managed browser. And the reason why you want to do this is that sometimes they have per app VPN that you need to launch that browser. You need to invoke that browser in order for you to have in-app VPN. So that's one of the reasons why. So to illustrate this, I'm going to jump into a demonstration on Intunes SDK. So let me go to here. So here's an example of our Intunes Azure environment. And so I'm going to go to, if you have Intunes, of course, I'm going to go to the client apps. And then here you can see that you have a whole bunch of stuff. And then what you do is you go to app configuration policy. And so here I have a policy already created. And in this policy, you just tell it which are the applications that you want the policy to apply to. So under custom apps, you have to provide the bundle ID of our ServiceNow apps. So since this is a test policy, you're interested in the fulfiller, and then the requester, and then onboarding. And so how you set the key value pair is you come down to the settings and you just apply the one I showed you. Here's the key, and I said launch the Edge browser, and then I want to set the default instance to this value. So this is the URL of your instance. So this is the policy, and I'm going to show you how it looks like for in the application. So here is my mobile application, and as you can see, when I go to General, you notice that there is no device management. So this tells me that this device is a personal device, and it is not managed by an MDM. So what I do is when I go to the App Store and I search for ServiceNow, you notice that there's a whole bunch of apps. And so what you have here is the Now Agent app, the Now Mobile app. But I really want to download the Intunes application. So I'm going to download this version. I want to download the Now Intunes version. So your users download this, and the first thing they'll notice is that you're going to get prompted with your Azure login, and so you have to apply your login information here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick so I can put in my password. So once you put in your password, what's going to happen is that it's going to send all the app configurations down to the device. So you notice that it says your organization is now protecting its data in this app. So it has to restart the app to continue. So when I hit OK, what it's going to do is going to shut down. And then you're going to launch it again. The user will have to launch it again. And I'm just going to apply some PIN code because it's a requirement that I have on my configuration. And you notice how it's already pre-configured. So this is the URL default instance that we set in the app config. But I'm going to use my personal instance. Now, you notice that what happened was that because we set the default browser to Edge, you notice how here's the app, and then it just launches the Edge browser externally. So this changes the behavior of your authentication. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen again. And then when I log back in, it's going to pass control back to the application. And this is what I get in my instance. So basically that's it. So app config is a nice way to set certain configurations on your mobile app, so that you can apply some sort of app protection policy against from your MDM. That is a very quick demo on our EMM. David, should we go into questions?
Yeah, we'll open up for any quick Q&A if anyone has any at the time. Any questions for Thu? And if there's any specific ones, then maybe we can take a deeper dive. Currently not seeing any questions at the moment. Maybe we can throw out some questions that we're hearing around from other customers, and kind of things we're hearing from the field. So I know one common question that I get off the top of my head is the MAM integration for mobile. Is that supported across Madrid and New York instances too? Or is it only Orlando?
So that's a very good question. So if you, um, it is supported in Madrid as well. So if you have the agent app um, for Intunes or BlackBerry, it is supported in Agent, New York, and Orlando. It is not instance specific. Now, for onboarding and for now, it's only supported for of course New York and in Orlando, because it doesn't work in Madrid yet. So that's a really good question. Another common thing that I've noticed is that some of your applications, your instances have IP restriction. And for IP restriction to work, you can bypass the IP restriction by invoking a in-app VPN. And so, of course, that will create some sort of tunnel to allow your users to connect. And in order for you to do that, typically what you want to do is you can only allow authentication for a specific managed browser defined by your MDM. So this is why we allow you to configure your default browser to that, so that you can get that invoke your in-app VPN for IP restricted instances. So that's a very common use case, and we're seeing that mainly in financial industries, because they have a much more stringent requirement. But if you guys don't have that, you can basically don't need the Intunes SDK or the BlackBerry SDK. You can just download the general release version, and then you can register that on your MDM and then distribute it normally. With that, you can apply some sort of app protection policy. Typically, when you have an MDM device, you also have the MDM client. And so with the MDM client, you have things like jailbreak detection, which is important to some. If a device gets compromised, let's say, for example, your device gets stolen or lost, for an MDM, they can remotely wipe that application if they choose to. Now, the downside of MDM is that they can also wipe the entire device. And if you do that, the users will have to know that all your personal pictures and all that stuff will also get wiped. So it's important when they opt into an MDM system that they're aware of what the corporation can do with that data. So those are some of the very common things that we've seen, common questions. So if you have any of these types of questions, feel free to ask. But for now, we only support those two keys, and those are very common use cases. But if you have other keys that you would like to use, please let us know.
Another question, maybe, but maybe this could be for another session. But like another question we get sometimes is, how does MAM play with mobile branding? Are those one and the same, or how are they separate, or how would a customer be able to get both MAM and a mobile branded app? Is that something we'll want to dive into in today's session, or leave it for another time?
Sure. So we can talk about branding. If you guys aren't aware of what we came out with Orlando, you can basically brand your application. Okay, so it's the same deck, but it also encompasses distribution, but I'll talk about the mobile branding part in Orlando. So this recently came out, and the goal is that right now when you download the application, it has a ServiceNow look and feel. But in Orlando, you can basically brand your application. And in addition to branding your application, you can have, well, branding application, you can change the icon, the app name, and the description. In addition to branding your app, your look and feel, we can also embed specific MDM SDKs. Currently right now is this Intunes and BlackBerry, but we plan to expand this if there's a need for it in the market. Sometimes people want Mobile Iron and they use App Connect or AirWatch and so forth. But right now we can, we only support Intunes and BlackBerry. And so some of the things that we can do is you provide some assets to us, like the icons and the splash screens. And it goes through a series of process where we build a custom app for you guys. And the distribution will go through a private app store. It's called a B2B store. And so in this way, the branded app will not be publicly available, right? And the process is that you'll have to open up a thing called Apple Business Manager to actually see the application. And this whole process takes about 2 weeks to do. So if you want a branded application, we're going to build it. We're going to submit it to Apple and Google. Actually, no, not Google, but to Apple. And then they have to review it. And that takes a good 5 to 10 business days. And then you'll get it. You'll get the application in your account. And then how it works is that you go through a series of forms. Actually, you fill out this form and it goes to a series of tasks. And then you'll get something like this. So this is the before look and feel of, I just showed you how now looks like. And then here's an example of how it's going to be branded. And then so forth. And then some of the common questions are, how long will it take? Like I said, about 2 to 4 weeks. Can I test a branded app on a test environment? You can't really test it. We just give it to you. The way you test it is using this thing called Test Flight from Apple, if you're not familiar with that. So for Android, we will give you the APK file. It's a branded APK file because there is no corporate or B2B distribution channel for Google Play. And so what you do is you just upload to MDM and you distribute it through your enterprise app store, or you distribute it how you want to in like some sort of portal web page or something. But for branded application, it's a little bit more complex in terms of distribution. But if you do have a use case, we will provide some sort of documentation on path of distribution. But this is already available in Orlando if you're curious.
So we have one question from the audience from James Rogers. Question is, so branded mobile apps, can they only be used by customers with Apple devices or users with Apple devices?
So you can opt in. So when you create a branded app, there are two platforms we support, is Android and iOS. Based on your users, if you have a iOS shop, then just pick iOS. But if you have both, then we'll build both these applications for you. The real challenge is distribution. And when I say challenges, means that if your customers or if your clients have personal devices, the distribution path will have to be some sort of redemption codes and that you create in Apple Business Manager. If your users are devices have it's managed by an MDM, you can basically distribute the application, push to all devices silently so that users won't have to do anything. Or you can host it on your enterprise app store where your user will have to go get it. The big challenge is if your devices are personal devices, BYOD, you would Apple will give you you download an Excel sheet, and this Excel sheet has links with a whole bunch of redemption codes, and somehow you have to distribute these codes, and there's no easy way to distribute it. That's why it's preferred to have devices that are corporately owned, so that you can distribute it. So to answer your question, branded apps can be for Apple, and it can be for Android as well. But again, the distribution will be very challenging if you have personal devices.
Any other?
So So another thing that I want to mention is that when you have a branded application, because the application is hosted on Apple, if we make security patches, like a patch 1.1 or 1.2, whatever, we will automatically build those branded applications for you. And because it's hosted by Apple, it will automatically update silently for your users. For Android, it's a little bit different. For Android, we provide you the APK file again, and then you upload it to your MDM portal, and then they would have to either download it again or you push it through MDM. So there's a little bit of maintenance involved in terms of Android updating versus iOS for branded applications. Sorry, Dave, you were about to say something?
Yeah, I think we have one question where that we didn't clarify. So when we talk about mobile branding, what part of the app is being branded? Is it in-app colors, icon, and so forth? What are the capabilities for mobile branding?
Yeah, so in the deck, I think I mentioned. So here is a visual. So this is the icon, and then this is the splash screen. And the other thing you can change is the actual application name itself. So that's the compilation part. The other thing you can change is the themes. I don't have it in my deck here, but you can change the coloring of the header and some of the, I guess, like the buttons as well. But there's a whole documentation that we have in terms of theming as well.
Cool, thanks. Any other questions from the audience? Otherwise, we will wrap up very shortly. But before we do jump or we wrap up, there's one other thing that I do want to mention. Additional resources that we have. So Fu, I can share my screen really quickly just to show them what's available.
Sure.
For resources. So first is if you actually go to our mobile community site. So the first topic that Fu mentioned was around mobile security and MAM. So on mobile community, we have this featured content called mobile security FAQs. So you click into here, you'll actually see a lot of the commonly asked questions around EMM security and deployment. And you can feel free to take a look at this. And if there's any questions that you have on top of this, feel free to reach out to us on mobile community as well. And then one other thing is mobile branding. We actually released a whole new course on mobile branding on Now Learning. Now Learning is a free course that you can access, and it actually gives you visuals and walkthroughs step by step, what to expect around branding and some of the things you can do around that. So the main resources here are mobile community and this Now Learning course. And of course, if you have any other questions, keep reaching out to us on mobile community. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, so it doesn't really look like it. So just want to say thank you all for joining us today. I hope you found this session informative and helpful. feel free to keep reaching out to us, and as we continue to explore other topics in future mobile app accounting sessions. We're going to have another session in 2 weeks, so make sure to follow our site to get the latest dates and information. And with that, I hope to see you at our next Mobile App Academy. Thank you all, and see you next time. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.